Okay, I want to start this before it starts getting noisy in the house and outside too, because the weather's getting warm, so you know it's gonna be a lot of noises. If you've been following my recent videos, I've been explaining complex, so-called complex topics in very simple terms. I'm a simple man. I like to take things that are complicated and simplify it to the most simplest explanations possible. And also if I believe if you can't do that, you don't know the topic well enough. First, let me start off with explaining a little bit about information and how information is measured. Suppose you go to the woods and you find a stick on the floor. How much information is that? Now, apart from the information it obviously took to create the universe and all the things within it, like a stick, water, these are not simple things, and these are very information-packed things. But still, in terms of what we are speaking about, a stick on the floor you find on the floor, you say that's natural, right? How much information is that? Not much. Suppose you find a stick that has a chip on it. How much information is that? Not much. But suppose you find two chips that are identical and carved in a way that seems like someone might have done it. Now there's information. The information, you multiply that by 2, right? Then you find another stick that has double the amount or 4 times the amount, and it starts to resemble like an arrow. How much information is that? That's a lot more information than the initial stick you found, right? Suppose you find an arrowhead that has a lot of information. Why? Because that can't be crafted naturally. There's nothing in nature that could craft an arrow, right? That's design, intelligence, information. Suppose you find an arrowhead, but you also find designs, patterns on that arrowhead. Each piece of the design constitutes additional information. So that's how you compound the information. It just compounds, and you multiply that by each design that you find. So Mount Rushmore is a mountain that has faces carved onto it. How much information is that? Now you can hypothesize how that can happen naturally and ridiculously say, wind blew rocks in the air, and over billions of years, as the rocks came down, they fell onto the mountains, and one by one it started to carve things, and it came to resemble faces coincidentally. That would be absurd, but you can imagine that, right? Actually, you can't, but you can imagine that foolishly. But the probability of that happening tells you how much information is in that, right? The probability of that happening naturally as opposed to unnaturally tells you how much information it would take for that to happen. So it helps you to understand the probability concepts, right? Okay. Now that you understand how information is assessed, the DNA is the most information-packed system in the entire universe. Okay. Now that you have that down packed, there's a wise man and there's a foolish man. And the wise man told the foolish man, "Can you give me an infinite amount of monkeys?" The foolish man said, "Yeah." "Okay, I want you to give me an infinite amount of monkeys, and I want you to give me an infinite amount of typewriters, the old typewriters." He said, "Yeah, I can give you that infinite amount, right? Each monkey gets a typewriter, and there are infinite amounts of those situations, right? I know you've heard this before, but I'm going to add a twist to it before I get into the topic at hand. And the wise man asks the foolish man, "Can you give me an infinite amount of ink for the typewriter?" He says, "Yeah, I can do that." "Okay. And the last thing I want you to give me is an infinite amount of time for the monkeys to go ahead and type whatever they're going to type, right? Just hammering away at the typewriter." "Okay." How likely is it for any one of those monkeys over an infinite amount of time typing away nonstop? How likely is it for them to compose the amount of information it would take to compose, let's say, a poetry of any artist, or the 90 or the 92nd Psalms, the book of Psalms, the 92nd chapter. How likely, it could be anything, but it needs to be something that has meaning, significance, right? Information, right? So what is the likelihood of one of those monkeys typing out anything of relevance that tells a story, that has information? The foolish man says, well, given enough time, anything can happen. That is the belief, right? Anything can happen as long as time is on its side. Give it an infinite amount of time and anything can happen. Okay, so given an infinite amount of monkeys, an infinite amount of typewriters with infinite amount of ink and an infinite amount of time, since anything can happen given enough time, one of those monkeys can actually type out the 92nd Psalm, book of Psalms, or a Shakespearean novel, or can write out The Matrix, the story of Neo, and right, can write out, or anything of significance. Given enough time, one of those monkeys will type that out. That's completely illogical. But now, let's put the twist on it. That typewriter is nature. When you type the letter A, nature wipes away the letter A. When you type in the letter B, nature wipes away the letter B. Why is that? Because the clean slate of paper that has no letters on it is the equilibrium of nature. When the monkey types in A, that is something that goes against the equilibrium of nature. But nature, the laws of nature is that it'll always go back to equilibrium. Always. I'm putting this in simple terms for you to understand, okay? Always. It always goes back to equilibrium, right? So when you put that in the picture, what is the likelihood now of any of the monkeys typing in a novel? Even if it doesn't make sense, what is the likelihood? It's impossible. Why? Because when they type in A, before they even type in B, A is deleted. Because A is not the equilibrium. Nothingness is the equilibrium. But not nothingness. Nature has things. But understand the analogy I'm trying to give you. In order for compounds to be created, in order for the molecules of life to be created, it has to go against the flow of equilibrium. Because nature does not have these things. The moment something pops up, nature will decompose it. Nature will break it down. So it's either you have equilibrium or you have all the letters. Now from A to Z are the letters that makes up life. Okay, try to understand the analogy. From A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up to Z. When this is there, only then can you have life. But if one piece is missing, life is broken down by equilibrium. So you have a clean sheet of paper, nature. The moment Q pops up is deleted. The moment Z pops up is deleted. The moment B pops up is deleted. The moment A pops up is deleted because it's not the equilibrium. The forces of nature brings it back down to equilibrium. So it's either you have a blank piece of paper or you have life, which is from A to Z, right? All the letters, all the complex systems that makes up life has to be there all at once to counteract the forces of nature that are trying to bring it back down to equilibrium. So it's like a ball at the bottom of a mountain. And the moment anything nudges that ball to go slightly up the mountain, it's like A has been typed in, right? The laws of nature will bring that ball right back down. So A gets deleted. Any progress that the ball makes, in any typing, see what I mean? Any letter that is typed onto the typewriter, is always deleted because it goes against equilibrium. The moment the ball goes slightly up the mountain, anytime any progress is made towards life, which is at the top of the mountain, the laws of nature brings it back down. So what you would always have is either nothingness, where the ball is at the bottom of the mountain, or the ball is completely at the top of the mountain. There is no middle ground, because if there is a middle ground, it's always going to come back down because the forces of nature are too strong. God has done this intentionally. I'm speeding because I only have 25 minutes to speak, and I don't want to lose my train of thought, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible so you guys can keep up with me. If anything, just rewind and listen back, and it will make sense the more you listen to it. Now, why is it that it has to either be at the bottom or all the way at the top? All the way at the top means it's living. All the way at the top means it has all the trillions of complex inner workings, all the complex interactomes, all the trillions of complex systems that it requires to stand against the forces of nature, which is always trying to bring it down that mountain. Which is why even when you do have a living system, it eventually dies. It eventually gives in to the forces of nature. God has intentionally done this so that you know that it can never climb up that mountain unless it's already at the top of the mountain, which will take intelligence to cause that to happen. So now that typewriter, when you type in A, is deleted, back to equilibrium, right? Now, so it's either you have a blank sheet of paper or you have A to Z completely there. But even when you have the A to Z, all the letters, all the alphabets, all the elements that keeps the life there, once you have the life there, little by little, those letters are being erased because nature is trying to bring it back to equilibrium where there are no letters. Understand my analogy, right? So A to Z, they're all there. The alphabet is there. Life is there. Or life is there. The alphabets are there, I should be saying. But it's trying to go back to equilibrium. So what's happening? A is starting to fade. Q is starting to fade. All the letters, little by little, they're starting to fade. But because all the letters are there, they're keeping each other in check. So Q revitalizes A so that A doesn't get erased. Z revitalizes Y so that Y can revitalize B and O and P and M and N. They're all keeping each other there. But eventually, they start to get weak. Wear and tear. They start to get weak. And eventually, Z is lost. It gives in to the forces of nature. Right? Little by little, all the pieces of alphabet start to chip away and they start to fade. And then they're trying to bring each other back. But eventually, it starts to fade. Old age, they get weak. Things start malfunctioning. Errors start happening. Cancer grows. Diseases grows. Laziness kicks in. And eventually, the forces of nature win. And you get a clean sheet of paper again. Right? So the forces of nature against life is so strong, it's so potent, it's so powerful, intentionally. It's intentionally that way by the designer, by the creator. So that the reasonable person would put this together and say, okay, so the nature wants the clean sheet of paper. Nature is not a clean sheet of paper, I know. Nature has many things in it. But in order to have the letter A, the first part of life, it has to go against the equilibrium. But nature, that's not natural. Nature will bring it back down to a clean sheet of paper. So understand the analogy I'm making. So nature is a clean blank sheet of paper. And the first step towards life would be A. But it will be deleted the first moment it makes an A. Or if it makes a Q. If it makes this enzyme or this molecule is degraded. You would need to have all the elements in place at once. Which is why once you have the elements at once, all the elements at once, it needs to shield itself. It needs to have a membrane, a cell walls, skin, an exoskeleton, anything that will protect it and shield it away from the elements of nature. So obviously, it's from nature, but it was not nature that crafted it. Because nature is breaking it down. So it takes intelligence to craft that which is breaking down what you are making, to prevent it from being broken down from the thing that you are making it from. But eventually, it does get broken down so that you understand that this was not what created it, but something else outside of it, something that supersedes it. But you would say, there is energy that would help A to be made and to be preserved. No, there isn't. You would say, no, there is. The second law of thermodynamics. The Earth is an open system. So there's energy coming in. This is not the reason why creationists and those who used to be evolutionists, who are now creationists, use the second law of thermodynamics to prove that life cannot come about on its own in nature. It takes something outside of nature to cause it to happen. Don't let anybody fool you. Earth is an open system, but we say it's a closed system for a different reason. If your phone needs to be charged, if your phone, let me say it this way. If your phone is losing power and it needs to be charged, will you take your phone to your stove, turn on your stove, and power your phone with the fire? No, that's ludicrous. Why? Why won't you do that? Because even though the fire is energy, it's not useful energy as far as the phone is concerned. In fact, because it's not useful energy as far as the phone is concerned, that energy would be destructive to the phone. You would have to channel that energy into something useful, a useful apparatus, a useful complex system, to then use that to charge your phone. The sun and photosynthesis in a plant. The sun is energy. But unless the plant has all the billions of complex molecular machinery within it to take the energy of the sun, to convert it into useful energy, the sun will serve no purpose to anything. So the plant is able to go through photosynthesis because the machinery is already there, not because the sun was hitting it, but because it was put there by something else, so that when the sun hits it, it can utilize the energy of the sun to do something productive. There are lots of energy all around us, but that energy is destructive to everything it touches, unless the thing it's touching is able to use by some complex molecular system that would convert that energy into useful energy, right? So yes, there is energy coming into the earth from the sun. So it's an open system. But that doesn't mean that it's going to power things to go through complex, beautiful engineering. How do I put this? Just as much as fire. So your phone and the fire on your stovetop, yes, it's an open system because there's energy coming in to, and it's touching the phone. But just because it's an open system, the energy is touching the phone, does that mean that the phone can utilize that energy from the open system? No. Again, that's absurd to think that. Why? Because there needs to be a separate apparatus that can channel the energy from the fire to charge the phone. So the earth is an open system, but you can't say because it's an open system that it's going to charge your phone from the sun. No. The phone has to have complex molecular machinery within it, and there needs to be an apparatus outside of it that would allow the phone to use the energy that is coming from the fire. Otherwise, it will destroy the phone. So energy is more destructive. So even though the sun hits the earth and the earth's surface, so yes, it's an open system, it means absolutely nothing as far as life is concerned, because molecules are not powered by the sun. So yes, as far as life is concerned, as far as molecules are concerned, they are in a closed system. So because of that, everything degrades into chaos. So because the equilibrium is chaos, the equilibrium is random things, nothing of substance. Because that's the equilibrium, the moment anything of value comes up, it is broken down back to chaos. So let me give you another example. Let's say you are nature. I don't know if this is going to be a good example, but let's say you are nature, right? And you are on the floor and you have absolutely no energy, right? You're laying down on the floor. In order for you to have energy to get up, you need to get up to eat energy, or you need to get up to get energy so that you can have the energy to get up. You see how impossible that is? It's like lifting yourself up with yourself. You can't do it. It's impossible. No amount of time will ever change that. Or let's say also you are on the floor, right? That's your equilibrium. And the forces of nature are keeping you there. But the moment something, maybe a bolt of lightning hits you, or something strange happens and you like make a movement, like you're about to get up, the laws of nature are gonna bring you right back down. You're gonna go right back to where you feel more comfortable laying down. You don't want to do any work because it takes a lot of energy to get up. You are in an open system. There is a lot of energy around you, but that energy is useless to you. In fact, is destructive to you. And the only way it cannot be destructive to you is if you already have every single thing that you need to withstand the destructive forces of nature. And even when you have all of that in place, you can only fight the forces of nature for so long. For us humans, it's about 100, 120 years. That's if you have special mightiness, like the Bible says. 80 years, but most of us, 70, 80, 90, we're dead. That's how long we can tolerate the forces of nature. For some creatures, it's only 1 week. You know, for other creatures, it's maybe 1,000 years, like a bacteria or whatever. Other creatures, even some bacteria, is far less than that. For a rabbit, it may be 30 years or far less. For a bee, it's about what, like a couple days? Because nature is always breaking things down back to equilibrium. Whether it's an open system or not, it makes no point, because in order to utilize the energy from that open system, you already need a complex system. But that complex system cannot develop on its own without energy. That is why